So she was either 15, 16, or 17 when they got married. We don't know because we don't know when she was born. And he was 36 years old. So they had about a 20-year age gap, but it apparently worked because they got married and they had 8 kids together. Hello, welcome to week 7 of Mix It Up, Black History in the Restoration, where we mix up a recipe and mix up the restoration by talking about our early Black members of the church. I'm Taylor Ricks, and today we are mixing up some chocolate cake while we talk about Mary Ann Adams Abel. She was married to Elijah Abel, who we talked about during week 3. So go check that out if you want to hear more about Elijah. So February is the month of birthdays in our house. We have 4 birthdays in February in our family, so we're going to be making some really simple chocolate cake. Nothing Cake by Courtney worthy, so just something very simple and very easy. All right, so Mary Ann Adams Abel, we'll just call her Mary Ann because that's kind of a tongue twister. She was born in Tennessee, and church records list her as living in one county in Tennessee, and then her death certificate said she was born in Nashville, Tennessee. And so we think the confusion might be because the 2 counties that are listed split and were kind of like rearranged. So it's possible that she lived kind of where the split happened, and it kind of created some confusion. But also what we don't really know is the year she was born. We know she was born on Christmas Eve, December 24th, but we're not sure if it was 1829, 1830, or 1831. So she probably went with 1829 to feel a little bit younger if she's anything like me. So with that, we also don't know a lot about her parents. We don't know if she was born as a slave or not. But what we do know is that in her teenage years, she moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, because that is where she met Elijah. You'll remember from week 3 that Elijah was serving in Ohio as a member of the 70, which we'll remember at the time was considered like a missionary calling. It was not the member of the 70 that we think of today. So he was serving as a missionary of the 70 in Ohio. And we don't know how they really fell in love and met, but we know that they met there and they got married. So she was either 15, 16, or 17 when they got married. We don't know because we don't know when she was born. And he was 36 years old. So they had about a 20-year age gap, but it apparently worked because they got married and they had 8 kids together. And 3 of those kids were born in Ohio before they moved to the Salt Lake Valley. The rest of their kids were born in the Salt Lake Valley. They, in all of the census records and things like that, their heritage, both of them, their heritage is mixed. So a lot of the census records list their heritage as mulatto, which I have heard some people still use the term today with no ill intent, but I think it's important to know that that is an outdated term that we don't use anymore. So if it's a term that maybe you've heard or you're used to, you can help us by educating other people and saying, well, by the way, that's a term we don't use anymore, or you can work on not using it yourself. But that's what they were listed as in the census record, was mulattoes. So we talked about that at the time. Elijah Abel was sometimes not seen as colored and sometimes he was seen as colored, and that's probably because their skin tone was similar to my skin tone, because I am half African American and half Caucasian myself. So they probably had a similar tone to mine, and they were called different things throughout their time, throughout their lives actually. So and as we know, Elijah was given the priesthood by Joseph Smith while he was still alive. And that allowed him to serve as a member of 70 and serve as a missionary. Well, once he got to the Salt Lake Valley, he of course wanted to be sealed to his wife and to his children. And so he petitioned like every prophet, Brigham Young, John Taylor, that followed Joseph Smith, and asked if he could be sealed to his wife and to his family. Well, Joseph Smith gave him the priesthood and told him it was legitimate, and so he would always tell these prophets, like, I legitimately have the priesthood. Joseph Smith said that I do, but first he went to Joseph Fielding Smith, who was a general authority at the time but was not yet a prophet, and then he went to John Taylor, who was the prophet at the time, and asked if he could be sealed. And John Taylor said, you know, you're mulatto, you're mixed, and it's not, you can't do it. And the timing was kind of bad, because at the exact same time that Mary Ann was trying to get sealed to her husband, which was around 1878, John Taylor also publicly came out and said that people could not, women of color could not go through the temple. So Brigham Young, you'll remember earlier, said that people of color could not have the priesthood. And then this was an official declaration that John Taylor made, not an official, not the one that's written down, but he officially said that women of color could not receive their endowment. And so it was bad timing. And as we know, those statements were upheld until 1978. So over 100 years that women could not receive their endowment, and that men could not hold the priesthood. So they remained faithful in the church, though, regardless of that, which I find always to be so incredible and so inspiring. And I've been thinking a lot about that, like how can people stay in a church that maybe doesn't allow them all the blessings and opportunities that that church allows others. And I think we have a lot of people in the church today that can relate to that in different ways, right? And I think the reason they stay is the reason that all of us stay. If we have a true testimony of our Heavenly Father and know that He loves us and cares about us, then we stay for Him. We're not really staying for somebody else, and we have faith that He is the one in charge and that He will work it out. And so that's what I think these people illustrate, that Elijah and his wife illustrate, is that they had faith to know that it would work out. Like I said, they had at least 8 kids. They might have had more, that's all we have recorded. And many of those kids stayed active members in the church throughout their lives, and we're going to learn about them in coming weeks as well. But I think that further illustrates that their faith was not built on man. Their faith was built on God. And we have to build our faith on God because man will let us down sometimes, right? So they had their testimony in the gospel of Jesus Christ, not the gospel of a person. And I just love that example and that testimony. It's very humbling to me, especially as an African-American sister myself, thinking of that time that I wouldn't have been able to attend the temple, and how grateful I am for those blessings in my life. So during their time in Salt Lake, they faithfully lived the gospel regardless of their inability to be sealed, and they lived in a lot of areas, and part of that is because they struggled financially quite a bit. So they lived in Ogden for a while, they lived in Mill Creek, they lived in a couple different wards in the Salt Lake Valley. Each of those times moving in an effort to find like more work. And for a while, they ran a boarding house, the Farnham boarding house, and they provided like lodging and meals for the people there. It was listed that Mary Ann did like the housework and the upkeep that way. I bet she did most of it. I bet she like ran that house. That's just my opinion, but I'm sure she did a lot of the work there. And Elijah served as a laborer in many capacities throughout their marriage and their life in the Salt Lake Valley. So when she was about 46 years old, Mary Ann contracted pneumonia, and she ended up dying from pneumonia. So unfortunately, she died at a really young age of 46 years old. Her funeral was held in her daughter's home, which was just a few houses down from the church meeting house that they attended for the Salt Lake 13th Ward. And she was buried there in Salt Lake at the young age of 46 years old. So I just love the story of the Abel family and of the matriarch, Mary Ann Adams Abel, and their willingness to remain faithful through adversity. I think they're a great example to all of us. And that is the story of Mary Ann Adams Abel. So this chocolate cake, we just mix it in the pan, and I don't know why. I just know that if my mother-in-law says you mix it in a pan, you mix it in the pan, because I don't want to mess it up. And you just mix it really good and then bake it, and then there's a simple frosting that I will post in the comments, and it is just that easy and super, super delicious. Thank you for coming to week 7 of Mix It Up, Black History in the Restoration, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.